We've had the chance now to look at and work with various chord progressions that have been organized according to what I've referred to as a kind of RO logic. In this video, we'll finally start to dive into that logic, which we'll term harmonic function or functional harmony. When we talk about functional harmony, we're talking about the idea that there are three primary roles or functions served by the various diatonic chords. These functions represent varying levels of stability or instability. Once again, I'll note that unless otherwise noted, the Roman numerals that correspond with the various functions are mirrored in both major keys and minor keys. The tonic function serves as a sort of home base, representing the most stable function at both the beginning and ending of most of our progressions. The tonic function is served by the one chord. This is why, as we've stated before, our progressions will usually begin and end on a 1. The next most important function is the dominant. Among the functions, the dominant represents the greatest degree of harmonic tension or instability, due especially to the prominence of the leading tone as either the third of the chord or the root of the chord. Accordingly, the dominant function is served by the 5 as well as by the diminished 7 chord. The 5 chord is the most typically encountered version of the dominant. Note that we also have referred to the 5th scale degree as the dominant as well. However, the 7 chord can also serve a dominant function effectively. We previously discussed how a 1-5-1 represents the simplest chord progression. 1 represents the stability of the tonic, which moves into the instability of the dominant, which in turn gives way to the return of the stable tonic function. But remember, we've also said that a penultimate 5 or dominant chord may be preceded by a 2 or a 4 chord. The 2 and the 4 each create a harmonic impulse toward that dominant, and so therefore we call it the predominant function. Both 2 and 4 chords are used quite frequently as predominants, though as the Hutchinson text indicates, we're perhaps more likely to encounter the 4 chord in many popular musical styles. The 1-5-1 progression is a good illustration of how predominant chords aren't strictly essential for functional harmony to, well, function, but it should still be just as quickly pointed out that the predominant function is still very common, and for good reason. In addition to making progressions just more interesting in general, predominant chords contribute to smoother, more engaging instances of voice leading as well. So as our previous chord progression examples illustrate, there's a fairly strict order for our harmonic functions. We begin with the tonic, we work our way toward the dominant, which may and often does include a trip first through the predominant, and that dominant resolves back to the tonic. Now wait a second. Here we've discussed the 3 primary functions, but once again we've delayed discussion of the 3 and 6 chords. Where do those fit in? Well, as I've said before, 3 chords and 6 chords tend to come in somewhere after the initial 1 chord, but before our predominant 2 or 4. That's because 3 and 6 tend to give the impression of the tonic sonority lingering around a bit before rounding the corner into a predominant. To categorize this feature, we'll adopt the terminology used in the Hutchinson text and describe the 3 and 6 as serving as tonic prolongation chords. Hutchinson describes tonic prolongation as a function unto itself, but I tend to understand it as more of a sidekick to perhaps the tonic function. Sometimes we also hear the term tonic substitution, especially as applied to the 6th chord. What's essential is that we understand that 3 and 6 help add a bit of color to the tonic, and if used at all, generally come before predominant chords. Hutchinson's text includes flowcharts that illustrate harmonic function. These are especially useful because they also show how we can order chords within the same function. For example, as we've mentioned before, if both of our tonic prolongation options are present, 3 will generally come before 6. This diagram I've designed is just another way of visualizing the flow of harmonic function. So within the traditions of tonal Western art music, are there ever any exceptions to the ordering of these chords? Absolutely. As a matter of fact, as we study cadences, we're going to see progressions in which the final tonic is preceded by a 4 chord rather than a 5 chord. We'll also see examples where 5 is the final chord, and even instances where a progression ends on a 6 chord. These are definitely important departures from the normal order of things that we will look at. Otherwise, we'll expect that our progressions will typically reflect harmonic function, though there are ways of doing so while still spicing things up a bit, as we'll explore down the road.